Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. If you're new, my name is Chris. Tonight's video is all about fragrances that I would consider masterpieces. In many cases, they're not perfect fragrances. They certainly are not all my favorite fragrances, and many of them would not have made my 10 out of 10 fragrance list that I did last week. But there's something, in my opinion, about the way that these were composed that involved a lot of artistry and creative mastery, and for that reason these are what I'm going to be calling my masterpieces. Some of these fragrances I wear rather frequently and others less so. Now there are a lot of fragrances I would consider masterpieces that I do not have in my collection, and therefore I will not be talking about them. One example would be Alien by Mugler. I do find that is a masterpiece, even though I don't care for that perfume at all. I do recognize the mastery and unique artistry that went into making that fragrance. So these are masterpieces that I own and are in my house, and with that, let's just get started. So first of all, I'm going to state that I know several of these fragrances are going to be very polarizing, and many of you will not care for my choices, but that's just the nature of fragrances and personal taste. I'm just gonna get the obvious ones out of the way. When I really took a look at my fragrance collection and thought about the masterpieces in my collection, really two came to mind. These are true masterpieces. I know they're polarizing and not loved by everybody, but the amount of artistry and creativity that went into producing these fragrances are just, in my opinion, incredibly impressive. And I'm going to start with a fragrance that has made almost all of my top lists, including my amber video last week. It is Le du Desert Marocain. This fragrance is basically a masterpiece amber fragrance, and it is a masterpiece dry and spicy perfume. It's not for everybody because the opening, I think, is really harsh. There are a lot of spice rack spices that kind of hit you up front. There's coriander, there's cumin, there are aromatics, and there's a sharp neroli note. But if you can get past the dry down, it is just the most beautiful, perfectly composed amber. It is a very dry fragrance. It has a woodiness to it, and just, in my opinion, a perfect 10 out of 10 amber in the background. Starting the list off with an obvious masterpiece I have talked about over and over and over again, Le du Desert Marocain. I think for interest and for fun, I'm going to put the notes up. I know a lot of you guys like to guess the fragrance, and there are other ones that don't like me to go ahead and read the notes. So I'm going to put the notes up immediately. So all of you guys who like to test your knowledge with fragrance notes, you can take a stab at it before I show the fragrance. So the next fragrance is a Parfums de Marly fragrance. It did not make my 10 out of 10 list because there is something I would change about this fragrance. I do not like the opening. The opening has a few notes that I don't care for, namely, well, mostly rhubarb, which gives it a little green sharpness. A lot of people don't like that. Some people love it. I happen to be in the group that doesn't love that, but everything else about the fragrance I love, and I have all of the flankers. If you haven't guessed it already, it is Delena, the OG. A lot of the fragrances that I'm going to show you tonight, in fact, most of them, I find a masterpiece because they are groundbreaking. They didn't smell like anything on the market, and that is the case with Delena. There is nothing that I can think of that smelled similar to Delena when this one came out. Rose, lychee, and rhubarb done in a way that is unmistakable. This is a fragrance that if you have smelled it before and you smell it on somebody, you recognize it. It is beautiful and one of the best sellers from Parfums de Marly for a reason. I love Exclusive in the wintertime, and I love La Rosée in the summertime, and Meliora might be my very favorite. That's one I tend to wear in the warmer months, and longevity isn't stellar. I think Delena is known for having great performance and a true masterpiece from Quentin Biche, which happens to be one of my favorite perfumers. Okay, I'm gonna put the notes up, see if you guys can guess which one this is. A very polarizing fragrance from Mugler. The original, when it first came out, I did not like it at all. I smelled it on a woman sitting next to me. I asked her what she was wearing because I wanted to make sure I never bought that fragrance. It was just, I just found it very loud, and it didn't help that she coated herself from head to toe in this fragrance. And we all know how that goes. You know, you love a fragrance, you just want to bathe yourself in it. And that's what she did. And unfortunately, with this particular fragrance, a little goes a long way. And that fragrance is Angel. It is, in my opinion, an utter masterpiece. I don't love the opening, but I really love it in the dry down. And my preferred take on it, which I've talked about before, is the Eau de Toilette. This is a more likable, less polarizing flanker of the OG. The patchouli is toned down. The abrasive sweetness is toned down. There is a funk in the original that I didn't care for. This one is a lighter, fresher version. There are fruits in the top and the patchouli is toned down. This is one of my most complimented perfumes. I do know that not everybody loves it. I still really appreciate it. I don't wear it as much as I used to just because my collection has gotten so big, but whenever I would wear this perfume, it was just like compliment galore and a true masterpiece of its time, Angel. Okay, sticking with polarizing masterpieces, I'm going to put the notes up. And if you guys are familiar with playing the Fragrantica game, you're going to get it very quickly. But this is another fragrance that was completely groundbreaking. When this came out, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, nothing smelled like it, nothing. And it is one of the most copied cologne perfumes in history because in my opinion it is so special, even though there are a lot of you out there that cannot stand this fragrance, or you used to like it and don't care for it as much anymore just because you smell it everywhere because of all the clones. And it is Baccarat 540. The other true masterpiece in my opinion, I remember precisely where I was when I smelled this for the first time, and it blew me away because I had never smelled anything like it. I still adore it, and I happen to live in a community where I don't smell it everywhere. What I smell in my community is Coco Mademoiselle, La Vie Belle, and Black Opium. Those are the three. I've only smelled this in the community a couple times, and maybe if I smelled it everywhere, I would get sick of it. This is my second bottle. I'm halfway done. I love it, and even my picky spouse loves it. We just went to a big fundraiser for my daughter's school, and I asked him what I should wear. I was wearing like head-to-toe sequins, and he said, "You look like a party. Wear Baccarat 540 because Baccarat 540 is a party," and that's what I ended up wearing. And people came up to me and said, "I love your outfit, and by the way, you smell great." So a true masterpiece in my opinion by one of my favorite noses, Francis Gurdejean. Okay, the next masterpiece in my opinion made my 10 for life. The notes are going to be up. And in fact, this fragrance house is notorious for not listing all of the notes or having the notes vaulted. So the notes are usually incomplete, but this is a fragrance that is special. It doesn't smell like anything I've ever smelled, and it is a true masterpiece in my opinion, my very favorite Xerjoff, and it is Ivory Root. Again, this made my 10 for life because I love this perfume and this fragrance just completely speaks to me. This is a spicy, very peppery, slightly camphorous, woody fragrance. It's camphorous in the beginning, but that dies down. That is actually what I call, it is a sneaky vanilla. There are no vanilla notes, and this doesn't scream vanilla, but this has a beautiful, subtle, very sneaky vanillic sweetness. And I love the contrasting notes in here. The spiciness, the pepperiness with the woodiness. It's a very dry fragrance, very unisex, perfect for year round. I tend to really love it when it's cold. And this surprisingly is a compliment getter. When I wear this, people who tend to like their fruity florals say, "Wow, you smell great." Masterpiece, 10 for life, Ivory Root. So notes are going up. Picking out a vanilla masterpiece proved a lot harder than I thought it would be. My favorite vanillas did not make the masterpiece list. And of course, the masterpiece vanillas had to include at least one or two Guerlain. And they do. And I'm holding a Guerlain vanilla in my hand. That's not my favorite vanilla, and it's not even my favorite Guerlain vanilla, but it is a true masterpiece in my opinion because it's a beautiful green vanilla. And if you haven't guessed it already, it is Angelique Noir. This is my favorite green vanilla. I have several green vanillas. This is by far my favorite green vanilla, but I still love my Cuir Beluga even more. Even though it didn't make my masterpiece list, Cuir Beluga is definitely one of my favorite Guerlain vanillas, and another one that made my 10 for life. This one seemed just a little bit more unique, a little bit out of the box. It is a stunning vanilla. Again, it's my favorite green vanilla, and I don't want to take away from the beauty and the artistry that's in here. I just tend to love Cuir Beluga just a little bit more. And this to me is very much a springtime vanilla. When I think of springtime vanillas, I think of my green vanillas because this one has a note of Angelica, and Angelica is in the celery family. So it's a little bit peppery, a little bit spicy, a little bit earthy. It has the sweetness from pear. There's a little bit of jasmine in here, but it's not too jasmine forward because not all jasmines are my favorite. And as I smell it, I know why I chose this as a masterpiece. It also has a little bit of pepper or pink pepper in here. It's just a gorgeous green woody vanilla. It did not make my 10 out of 10 because this one has issues with performance. Actually, my Queer Beluga, I can get that to last all day even though it's quiet. This one lacks in performance, but a stunning green vanilla, my favorite green vanilla, and a perfect vanilla for spring. So you probably won't be surprised that a Chanel fragrance made it into the masterpiece list, and this fragrance I know is a very, very polarizing fragrance because of the video I did about a month ago, which was Instagram's least favorite fragrances. I know a lot of people out there hate this fragrance with a passion. I personally don't wear the OG. The OG is a little bit too much for me. I am a fan of the flankers, and the fragrance that I'm speaking about, if you haven't guessed it already, is Chanel No. 5. Listen, it's been around for decades, over 50 years, for a reason, and people still wear it to this day. It is some people's signature scent. In fact, I was at Orange Theory about 3 weeks ago, and a very young person who was working out next to me smelled really, really good. I asked her what she was wearing, and she said Chanel No. 5. Young, old, men, women, still love to this day. And in my opinion, Chanel really figured out how to use aldehydes in a beautiful way and make a fragrance that is very recognizable. Chanel has a very recognizable DNA. For me, it's like aldehydes and ylang ylang. I can pretty much, with my eyes closed, recognize any Chanel fragrance. I don't have the OG, I have Eau Première, which I love, and I've had this for a long, long time. This one and Chanel No. 5 L'Eau are my two favorite flankers and the ones I enjoy. I don't own L'Eau. I go back and forth whether or not I need it because I have Eau Première, which is a modern take on Chanel No. 5. So the aldehydes are toned down. It's a little bit more quiet. It's not as brash. It's a little bit more buttery and a little bit more powdery. It's a more refined, softer, smoother, more buttery, modern take on the original, and one that I still own and love and recognize it for being a masterpiece. Okay, notes going up. The next one I wanted to put in my 10 out of 10 perfumes because for what this fragrance is, it is a 10 out of 10 for me. I wouldn't change a thing. But the reason why I didn't make my 10 out of 10 because the availability has been so abysmal and disappointing. But I still recognize it as a masterpiece. It is the only new release that's a masterpiece, but I don't see me changing my mind anytime soon because this has some of the components that are my favorite aspects or my favorite notes in a fragrance. This is an incensey vanilla with leather. Now, leather isn't my favorite note or accord, but incense and vanilla are some of my favorite notes, and this is basically a perfect interpretation of those notes. And of course, it is Babycat. So it's an incensey vanilla with leather and saffron. It starts off, I get that peppery incense right away, and the incense lasts throughout the entire fragrance. This to me is an incense that is very universally appealing. I love the pepperiness. I love the spiciness. The saffron is there. It's not in your face saffron, but it's present, it's recognizable, and it goes so well with the incense and in the dry down the vanilla. The vanilla is absolutely beautiful. It's smoky, it's sweet, it's incensey. The leather is there, but it is a dry leather, and it's almost like a fine leather goods leather. It's not harsh, it's not brash, it's very smooth. And this one is very tenacious. I don't know about everybody else. I have no problems with this fragrance. I spray it on clothes, a jacket, scarf. I can smell it for days. And I have got compliments on this from like people at the post office and UPS who smelled me across the counter. A masterpiece that I begrudgingly put on the list, but I had to recognize it for its beauty. And hopefully the rumors are not true, that it's not discontinued. And maybe one day soon, Yves Saint Laurent will wake up and realize that there is such a demand for this fragrance and either re-release it or make it more widely available to the public because it is, in my opinion, a masterpiece. All right, notes are going up. This fragrance is a masterpiece because it is a masterpiece cherry and started the cherry craze that we know, still going strong today. In fact, I probably own 18 cherry-centered fragrances, but this is the one that started the craze. And for that reason, it should be recognized. This is I would say it's a masterpiece for its creativity. I think many of us know that it lacks in its longevity, but I'm not going to take away from the uniqueness and creativity that went into making this because as far as I know, there really wasn't any cherry fragrance out there that was similar to this. This is a syrupy, boozy maraschino cherry with a little bit of tobacco, a little bit of almond. The almond is Not sweet and not overly bitter. It's just right in the middle. This is a fragrance that my entire family loves. My high school daughter likes to wear this, and my husband, when I wear this, says I smell great. So I did want to briefly recognize Lost Cherry for its masterful artistry and creativity and for starting this cherry craze. And I do love cherry as a note in perfumes. I grabbed 2 fragrances that I'm putting in the Patchouli Masterpiece category. The first one should be no surprise. It is a fragrance. It is another fragrance that made my 10 for life. It is another Chanel fragrance, and I think it's a masterpiece how Chanel figured out how to make an incredibly beautiful, appealing patchouli fragrance for women. Now, this is a unisex fragrance, but most of the people I know who wear it are females. But again, anybody can wear anything. But I do think that this is a masterful concoction by Chanel. You have probably guessed it already. Coromandel by Chanel, a fragrance that I just find pretty much close to perfect because for me, it has all the things I love in a perfume. It has patchouli. I love patchouli. It has a beautiful amber. I love amber. There's incense in here. I'm a big incense lover. There's a little bit of a gourmand flair in here. This one, the one I have, has white chocolate in it. So it does lend a nice white chocolatey sweetness that might be too much for other people. I find it lovely. And I think that sweetness works very well in here because the type of patchouli that is in Coromandel leans towards that wet concrete type of patchouli. So the white chocolate goes so nicely with it. The amber notes go perfectly with it. And I think the incense gives it a depth and a little bit of mystery and exoticism. That being said, it's still a very universally appealing fragrance, 100% signature scent worthy. I mean, I guess the only time I wouldn't wear it would be going out in the middle of the summer to do something athletic, but in any situation, I could see myself wearing this. Another masterpiece from Chanel. So the next one is another designer. It's a fragrance that I have loved for so long, and for a while, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, it was pretty close to my signature scent. It's a fragrance by Narciso Rodriguez, who is known for his musk and fragrances, and this is Narciso for her, the original EDT. Now, I own the EDT and the EDP. I love them both equally, but it was the EDT that I smelled originally and was blown away. I remember I was in Sephora and I was testing all these fragrances, and when the SA showed me this one, it was like, I had never smelled anything like it. It blew me away. Love it. Still think that this is an utter masterpiece, even though it's not for everybody. So it's Orange Blossom, Osmanthus, Patchouli, and the Narciso Rodriguez musk. The musk in these rectangles tend to be like a dirty musk, and it's different from the cubed, the Narciso Rodriguez in the cube. For whatever reason, and I don't know why, the musk in the cubes is just not my favorite. I prefer it in the rectangles, and the EDP is beautiful too. This has rose, this has Orange Blossom and Osmanthus, and these two together, by far, one of my most complimented fragrances of all time. But when this came out, nothing was like it. And still, I can only think of one fragrance in particular that's remotely close to that, and that is Sarah Jessica Parker's Lovely. But in my opinion, a masterpiece from Narciso Rodriguez. So the next fragrance is another super polarizing fragrance. It's one of those I know so many people absolutely hate, and the OG, I will admit, I do love it on my godmother. It is my godmother's signature scent, and I always loved it on her when she wore it, particularly in the dry down, because it has that Guerlain vanilla, but it does not work on me. I do not like the opening because all I smell is like jet fuel. The animalic notes, the leather in there is just not for me. But I do have a flanker that is my favorite, and even though a lot of people absolutely hate Shalimar, we have to recognize that it is a masterpiece. There was nothing like it when it came out, and still to this day, I have people who tell me in the comments, Shalimar is a love, it is their signature scent, and they have never found anything else they love as much. My favorite flanker, unfortunately, is discontinued. I do not know why, because I think this is one of the most universally appealing. It is Shalimar Cologne EDT. It's very confusing. It's EDT Cologne. But anyways, it's got the animalic notes toned down. The leather's toned down. I don't really get that burn fuel, and it has these beautiful citrusy notes. So gorgeous citrusy opening, and the vanilla in here is very fluffy and light and sweet. But even though I don't like the OG and some of the flankers, I do recognize that Shalimar is for sure a masterpiece. The next one is the only fragrance that made the list from the house of EBK, one of my favorite houses. This house, in my opinion, creates so many fragrances that are close to masterpieces. In my opinion, their Alexandra and Patchouli is an utter patchouli masterpiece. I have had people tell me in the comment section that they are not patchouli fans. They got a hold, or they tested Alexandra and Patchouli, and they too thought it was a masterpiece. This fragrance is so beautiful and stunning, and when I wear it, if not the most complimented fragrance, certainly one of the most complimented fragrances I have ever owned from people who I would never guess would compliment me on a patchouli-based fragrance. So much so that I've had people at work ask me to make them samples so they could wear it out. And one of my dearest friends who really only likes super feminine floral fragrances, in other words, her fragrances are Delena and Chloe. I made a sample of this for her. She ended up wearing it at a party that night, and she said never had she ever got so many compliments. Females, males, young, old, everybody came up to her and said, "What are you wearing?" This is a stunningly gorgeous unisex patchouli fragrance, and another one that my picky spouse whipped his head around when I sprayed it and said, "Wow, that's really good. What are you wearing?" And actually took the bottle out of my hand and sprayed himself, which never happens. But like all other EBKs, this is so perfectly blended. So there's linen, there's cotton, there's a little bit of mimosa, there's an orris in here. So it's a little bit buttery, a little bit powdery. For sure, the patchouli is the star, but it is not dirty, it's not earthy, it's not skanky, it's not head shop, and it's not chocolatey either. It's just this literal perfect patchouli. There's some brightness up at the top. There's some citruses. I want to say either bergamot or lime that really kind of lifts this fragrance and elevates it. EBK fragrances are some of the most smooth and well-blended fragrances I have ever tested, and a 10 out of 10 fragrance with regards to performance. This fragrance is not messing around. Is another one that will last you all day, and another one that made my 10 for life. Alexandra and Patchouli. So the notes are going to go up. This is a fragrance marketed towards men, and this is another groundbreaking fragrance, I think, for the Perfume House. It is one of its best sellers of all time, and another fragrance that is one of the most cloned and copied fragrances of all time. It is the only fragrance that I tracked down 4 separate men on 4 separate occasions to ask what they were wearing, and they were all wearing the same fragrance, and that is Creed Aventus. I know it is very polarizing. People are sick of it. It has been reformulated. I actually can recognize that it's a little bit different from the first bottle that I bought my spouse, and this is a fragrance that he absolutely loves, as you can tell. This one's almost empty, and this is either the second or the third bottle I have purchased. I get it. Lots of people are sick of it, but an utter masterpiece. Is a beautiful pineapple, woody fragrance that had never been done before, and when I smell it on another man, I think they smell absolutely fantastic. Sticking with the fragrances that are marketed towards men, I think this is a designer masterpiece. Even though it is marketed towards men, I would actually wear it, and I have worn it, even though this is in my husband's fragrance collection, and he loves it and loved it when I gave it to him. This fragrance to me is a man that is just dressed to the nines, and it is Dior Homme Intense. This is a beautiful iris-based fragrance. So there's iris, there's ambrette, there's lavender, and there is a woody base. Another absolute designer stunner from the house of Dior, marketed towards men, but enjoyed by females like myself. Now I have 2 more fragrances. I think I'm going to stop at the next fragrance. Sticking with fragrances that are marketed towards men, the next fragrance is a vetiver-based fragrance, and I don't have it anymore, or my husband doesn't have it anymore. He blew through a bottle. It's gorgeous, and I did want to recognize at least one more fragrance marketed towards men, and it is vetiver-based, and that is Terre de Hermès. I love this fragrance on men. It is one of my favorite fragrances to smell on another man. There is something about it. The vetiver is perfect. There is a pepperiness in there that I love, but since I don't have it anymore, I'm not going to talk too much about it. So the other fragrance that is in my collection that is vetiver based, and I think is so incredibly unique and definitely different than anything that had ever been on the market before, and I think safe to say a probable masterpiece, is Bal d'Afrique. Now if you can see, this fragrance is almost gone. So this is a beloved fragrance. So even though it is a vetiver-based fragrance, it has these beautiful, juicy citruses. Vetiver is very heavy in a lot of masculine fragrances. It's also in a lot of female-based fragrances. It lends a dryness, a grassiness, and goes very well with cedar when cedar is involved in the note profile. And I think the combination of notes in this fragrance is just stunning. I love the freshness, the slight fruitiness of it. Vetiver's here, but it is so well done with these fresh, juicy, fruity citruses, and the violet gives it a soft sweetness and a subtle powderiness. So I think I'm going to stop there. So I'm not going to stop there. There's one more that I forgot, and I forgot about it because I don't wear this fragrance, but it is an utter masterpiece. It's actually still in the box, and it was my grandmother's signature scent. It's really not my thing, but I do recognize that it is a masterpiece, and it is Samsara, a beautiful ambery, floral, powdery sandalwood fragrance. I think the main floral in here is ylang ylang. There's a little bit of peach, a nice sandalwood base, a slight vanillic sweetness, and another masterpiece in that there was nothing else like this when this came out. When this came out, I actually liked it. I had a little teeny sample, but it was my grandmother's signature scent, and my grandmother who wore this was really, she was just classy and just super put together, and I bought it to remember her, even though I don't wear it. It's a very special fragrance. So that is it. Now I've covered my masterpieces. Fragrances in my collection or in this house that I would consider masterfully created. Tell me what you think. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite masterpiece fragrances are. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. For those of you who come back every week, who are subscribed to my channel, and who always leave me a nice note in the comment section, I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoyed your time with me, and with that, I will see you on the next one.